Welcome to Binge Watchers, where we talk about the stories and characters we love and the shows they live in. And that was the first time I've said that in about 4 years in an actual review. But I did watch Rings of Power, though. The TLDR is that I thought it was fine. I didn't think it was as bad as some of the most introspective video essays said it was, and I also didn't think that it was that big of an offense to the world of Tolkien, sort of. But I will say that while I am a fan of The Lord of the Rings, I'm not a hardcore fan. I don't know all the lore in and out. I mostly just read and loved The Hobbit and The Lord of the Rings, and I'm a fan of the Peter Jackson movies, but you know, who isn't? I know I'm rambling, but I think that this is important context. I think that if you're deeply connected to the lore as it is presented in the original text, there are things in this show that will make you a little bit angry, and it will be harder for you to get past, things like Galadriel's whole character. I might have the same problem when it comes to something like Warhammer 40k, and if they adapt that into a show, depending on how they do it, but I trust Henry Cavill. But anyway, if you can look at Lord of the Rings as a Lord of the Rings adjacent fantasy show, there are some things to like here. So, The Lord of the Rings is a big fat origin story for stuff in The Lord of the Rings. How did the rings get made? What happened between Galadriel and Elrond? How did Middle-earth look before Mordor? What's up with Numenor? Just, what's up with them? This was probably my least favorite aspect of the show. All of these little things that are designed to make you go, I get that. Because if you're a big enough of a fan of the story, then you'll see these reveals coming from a mile away. And if you're not, you're just not going to care. I did think that the show itself had some interesting stories to tell. There's an interesting plot line about the politics and internal struggles of the elves, and you get to see how, some of the common people just living their lives in Middle-earth are impacted by everything that's happening. Those aspects I thought were the best part of the show. I also liked that in season 2, we get some scenes with orcs, like with orc characters, like what they care about. I thought that was cool, although, and I might be misremembering here, but I could have sworn that in one scene you could see an orc couple holding an orc baby, which aren't orcs made? Like, don't they hatch or something? Am I way off? Are there orc babies? Anyway, so in true big sprawling fantasy show fashion, most of this show follows odd pairings of characters as they hunt down their own MacGuffins and plot points while mostly never crossing paths. You got Galadriel and the mysterious stranger that, I wonder who that can be, and the Harfoot and the mysterious stranger that I wonder who that can be. And mostly, I liked these stories. I think that, like many people, the Lord of the Rings books are tied in my brain to the Peter Jackson movies. When I imagine the Lord of the Rings books, I see the Peter Jackson movies. Now, the Peter Jackson movies are largely loyal to the source material, but definitely took some liberties that collectively we were all just sort of fine with because the movies were good and the internet was not yet the toxic cesspool of darkness that it is today. When you're watching Rings of Power, you almost have to separate it from established lore because it's a story that's based on Lord of the Rings lore, but also departs from it quite significantly. For me, that was pretty hard to do. So I found myself enjoying some of the characters and a lot of the aspects of the show until the moment that I was reminded that it's supposed to be The Lord of the Rings show. This is why I thought season 2 was much better than season 1. It definitely still has all of those here's how Han Solo got his jacket moments, which I think those are lame, and I can't imagine anyone getting a kick out of those, but in general, that season focuses a lot more on just what these characters are going through, which is interesting. Celebrimbor is a great character, and I think it's enough of a non-spoiler to say that I enjoyed the whole Lord of Gifts arc with him. I thought actually that's one of the standouts for the whole show, but I think the standout character for the entire show across both seasons is Elrond. I don't know if I can picture that it is the same character as Elrond from the Peter Jackson movies that I know and love, But in this show, he is a layered and deeply troubled character who I think is written and acted beautifully, and he represents the aspects of the show that I really liked. I liked the character moments and the struggles that a lot of them go through, even if sometimes the overall story was just kind of fine. One of the things that I liked the least about this show was how it looked. I know that this was like the most expensive show to have ever been made, but it just doesn't look great. If you compare it to Game of Thrones, which also had a massive budget, or The Last Kingdom, or Vikings, which I'm sure had a fraction of the budget as Rings of Power, those shows look and feel so much better, so much more real. Even The Witcher, which I thought was, not amazing, looked pretty damn good. In Rings of Power and The Wheel of Time, both of the big Amazon fantasy shows, the sets just look like sets, the costumes look like costumes, everything is too clean. Even when it's dirty, it looks like it's very carefully placed dirt. That's one of the main things that really kept me from getting lost in this show. And like boy, did I want to get lost in this show, because I'm a huge fantasy fan. There's a lot of criticism about this show that is very Lord of the Rings specific criticism that I think is generally fair and valid. And I think that has been talked to death since this show came out, like how they do things like take the nameless things that move beneath the world and just take all the mystery out of them by showing them to you on screen, which sure, some of it I agree with, and some of it is just stuff that nothing will ever be as good compared to whatever it is that you have in your mind through the lens of nostalgia. That is perfect. Nothing is going to ever come close. I promise you that people had plenty of criticism that sounded much the same about the Peter Jackson movies when they came out. I'll concede that those are way better than this show, though. But on its own, as a story, this show felt mediocre. It was a fun watch. It had some characters that I liked, but it had the Netflix movie vibe where you feel like you're just watching content, not art, Bottom line, should you watch it? I think the perfect audience for this show is casual Lord of the Rings fans. If you're a hardcore fan, this show will make you angry. If you're not really into the Lord of the Rings, but you like fantasy, then that's weird, but if you exist, this will feel like a fun fantasy story to pass the time with. But if you casually like Lord of the Rings, you're into Lord of the Rings, you're not super attached to it, it's not a part of who you are, you're not deep into the lore, or you don't care or won't notice little changes, you will have the most fun with this show, because you will get a pretty solid fantasy stories, even if it's a little paint by numbers, with some Lord of the Rings flavor put on top. I'd put myself in the middle between casually liking Lord of the Rings and being a hardcore fan, which is why I think I was able to have some fun with this show while also being mildly annoyed by it. What about you? Have you watched The Rings of Power? If you have, let me know in the comments down below. Just please make sure to use spoiler tags if you're going to spoil anything. And if you're finding Binge Watchers for the first time, welcome. I'd like to invite you to join the Binge Watchers community. I have not posted anything to this channel for 4 years, and I don't think it's going to take me another 4 years to post again.